Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet. God, I wish I had a better intro. Today I am doing a tag video. This is the horror movie tag, I suppose it's called. I found this through the channel of Alice Movie Talks 93. So this is just a bunch of questions about horror, which I love. So I'm about to talk about horror movies. First question is, what's the first horror movie you remember watching? And that would be the... Is it 1919? 1920? It's a 1920s, maybe even earlier, silent version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with John Carradine. When I first started getting into horror movies, it was through my dad, and we decided to start at the very beginning with that version of Jekyll and Hyde. We shortly after watched the silent version of Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, which remains one of my favorite movies of all time. And then we moved forward to, Dracula, Frankenstein, all the Universal movies, and I've just kind of progressed roughly forward in the horror genre ever since. The next question is, what is your favorite horror movie, and oh god, how can I ever pick one movie ever? I mean, for a while I've said Nosferatu, but these days I'm not so sure. I still love Nosferatu to pieces, but there's just so many other movies I love. I think Beetlejuice is probably my favorite movie, but I don't really consider that a horror movie. I consider it a comedy with dark supernatural elements to it. I also really, really love the 1990s Coppola Bram Stoker's Dracula, but I don't know if I'd classify that as horror. I don't really think the aim was to scare with that movie. It's almost more of a romance, but it's a beautiful movie, and I love that one as well. I love Bride of Frankenstein. Anything with Christopher Lee in it or Vincent Price in it, I love those guys. So, for example, any of the Christopher Lee Dracula movies or the Roger Corman Edgar Allan Poe films, I absolutely love those as well. Yeah, Nosferatu, I guess, but I love way too many movies to pick just one. Next question is favorite horror genre. And I would pretty much, without a doubt, have to say gothic horror. The reason I got into horror was because I was entranced with sort of these classic sort of Halloween icons, these horror icons I loved. Vampires and ghosts and witches, werewolves. That's what led me to both reading and watching Dracula, Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, etc. I got into Edgar Allan Poe, I got into Lovecraft. Yeah, most of my favorite modern horror movies are pretty gothic as well. I also love supernatural horror, occult horror, I love dark fantasy, but all of that just sort of overlaps with these sort of themes, these sort of dark, mysterious, atmospheric types of movies with maybe sort of an elegance to them, I suppose. So yeah, gothic horror is probably my favorite horror genre. What genre scares me the most? I mean, you don't have to do a lot to make me uncomfortable and freak out during a movie, but home invasion definitely disturbs me. But the best way to instantly make me uncomfortable is with some kind of body horror thing. Like the new Suspiria, the contortion scene in that, oh my god, I could barely sit through that. Yeah, I don't know if I'd consider that scary as much as just sort of a gut-wrenching and disturbing, but body horror definitely disturbs me. If you combine horror with sort of body horror with sexuality in any way, it's even worse, even more sort of uncomfortable for me. That and home invasion movies, torture movies, I really just can't do. They're a bit much for me. Yeah, those are probably the ones that scare me the most. Definitely not my favorite genres of movies, but they definitely make me the most uncomfortable. But frankly, absolutely any genre of horror can freak me out if you do it the right way. The last horror movie that scared you, that is probably Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, actually. It wasn't super disturbing to me. I don't think it's going to haunt my nightmares in any way, but all of the scares in that were very effectively paced and uncomfortable to me. If a movie can make me do this when I'm watching, sort of put my hands like this and cover my ears, which, yeah, I do that during horror movies because horror movies are scary, but that's why I watch them. Duh. Anyway, yeah, those scares got me because they were set up so well. And I mean, the scene with the pale lady, I'm not going to spoil it, but it isn't really a jump scare. It's just really well paced sort of dread. I just thought it was really well done. It creeped me out. Yeah, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is probably the last movie that scared me. Ultimate horror movie Scream. Definitely the long drawn out oh my god from Troll 2. You know which one I'm talking about. Actually, no, I take that back. The Goblin Queen's insane scream after, like, her hand gets cut off in that movie is probably the ultimate horror movie Scream. Actually, in all seriousness, the first one that's coming to mind right now is the scream that the Bride of Frankenstein lets out at the end of Bride of Frankenstein when the monster first tries to touch her and she just sort of lets out this shriek. I don't think it's the ultimate in sort of terrified scream necessarily in a movie, but it's a scream that I can still hear and play back in my head because I feel like it's just such an iconic sound. There's a few others, but that's the one that's in my brain right now. So I don't know if I'd really consider that the ultimate horror movie Scream, but that's what I'm going with right now. The next question is concept you like to see in a horror movie. I'm not entirely sure what this means. I feel like it could either mean what is a concept that you enjoy in horror movies, or what is a concept that you haven't seen in horror movies that you like to see. So I'm going to try and do both. I mean, conceptually, I always like moments when your main character is still sort of fundamentally good, but somehow entangled in, committing the evil. That's Jekyll and Hyde. That's a lot of werewolf movies. But, just sort of having the main character as sort of an unwilling participant in the evil goings-on is always makes for a good plot. As for a concept that I'd like to see in a horror movie, I've started writing so many stories based on just things that I haven't seen that I'd like to see. So a few of those are, what would happen if the entire world's water supply was infected with some kind of creature or virus or something deadly, or like an entire town's water supply or something like that. That's an idea. Another one, which is the story I'm writing right now, is explain all the unaccounted for bitten victims in every Dracula movie ever. That's a thing. So yeah, those are some concepts I'd like to see, but I'm already kind of trying to cover that right now, so I don't know. Favorite horror franchise is probably just sort of, like I said, the Universal Monsters franchise in general, because most of them are connected, especially Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman. I love all of those movies, right from the original Lugosi Dracula to the ridiculousness that is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I would also throw out, as honorable mentions, I love... Why am I blanking? I love the Hammer Draculas and Frankensteins. I love all the Hammer horror movies. I love all of American International's Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe movies. I love the Living Dead movies, both Romero's stuff and the, Return of the Living Dead stuff, which is mostly because it's set in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where I live, and there's a bunch of punk rock music in it, but that's enough to make a movie fun, in my opinion. Also, it's a brilliant horror comedy, so that kind of helps. I don't really think I need to say anything else for that. So yeah, those are my favorite horror movie franchises. And the last question is favorite creator / director for horror. And my favorite director is sort of a tie between Tim Burton and Guillermo del Toro. Tim Burton definitely works a lot with macabre subjects, but I don't consider that many of his movies horror. They're definitely beloved by a lot of horror fans, but really the only one that I consider a straight-ahead horror movie is Sleepy Hollow, and that movie I don't find scary. I find it hilarious in a lot of places and a lot of fun, but, I mean, Tim Burton's my favorite director. Guillermo del Toro deals a lot more with what I'd consider not straight-ahead horror, but more effectively horrific horror movies. Crimson Peak is probably one of my favorite modern horror movies, period. And I love Pan's Labyrinth, and I love basically anything he touches. I would probably have to go with Guillermo del Toro, but I love Hitchcock, I love Argento, I love Roger Corman, I love John Carpenter. Who else? Todd Browning, Terrence Fisher. Why am I blanking on director names? But yeah, I don't really need to name too many other people. Those are probably my favorites. So, thank you for watching. This is a tag that anybody can join, so anybody that watches this, please feel free to do it. Please check out Alice's channel. That will be underneath. And thank you for watching this video. Goodbye.